I say live video? Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Moksha, and welcome to the season finale of our virtual Vinstitute tastings. As you can see, I decided, because this is such a special event, to get a little dressed up today. I've got my branded orange Oliver Osoyoos Wine Country shades, which I'm also wearing because I lost my real sunglasses. And I have my beautiful orange Oliver Osoyoos Wine Country half-corked Marathon Roadshow hoodie, which is just real hot, so real snug. So anyways, welcome everybody to the final installment of this Vinstitute series that we've been doing as a collaboration between Oliver Osoyoos Wine Country and the Vinstitute Wine School. These sessions have been a really entertaining and satisfying way to connect with people from the distance that is kind of mandatory these days, but it's nice to be able to connect to people in their homes or to have people be able to watch these videos afterwards, learn a little bit about some of the absolutely magnificent world-class wineries that are in Oliver and Osoyoos. Now, because this is the season finale, we are going to be talking about one of the most important topics in wine, you could say. There's so much wine from throughout the world. There are so many grapes being grown in so many different countries, and yet the country that probably holds the highest regard and esteem in terms of its winemaking traditions would be France. And the region within France, with the exception potentially of maybe Champagne, the region that probably has the most influence over wine drinkers is the region of Bordeaux. Now, we have talked a little bit about some Bordeaux grapes in the past on this series, and I've gone into a little bit of extra detail in the podcast that we do, which also just had its season finale back on Friday of last week. So if you missed the final installment of the first season of that, you can check that out anytime now. It's up, it's ready to go. But the point is, Bordeaux wines are things that tend to come up quite frequently, but today we are going to talk in detail about what actually constitutes a Bordeaux blend. This is super flippin' hot. That's right. Season finale. Season finale, that's right. I pulled out my least stained shirt for this. I didn't iron it, but I did pull it out. I'm still moving, kind of. All right, everybody. Now, welcome in proper to the season finale of the Virtual Vinstitute, episode 11, where we talk about Bordeaux-style blends. Now, vital distinction there, Bordeaux-style blends. If you make this wine in France, you call it a Bordeaux blend. And of course, where are you making it? You're making it in Bordeaux. You're making it in the regions that I have very crudely drawn on this map right here. If you make it anywhere outside of this region, you can at best call it Bordeaux-style. That is because Bordeaux is a protected designation, just like the aforementioned Champagne, just like Port, which we talked about the other day on this very stream. And so, Bordeaux is a term that holds a lot of weight. It holds a lot of significance. A lot of wineries will use the term Bordeaux style. They'll put that right there on the bottle to give some representation of intent. But not everybody really understands exactly what they're getting with a Bordeaux blend, which is why I want to bring you to the map. On the little map I've drawn here, this is the Atlantic Ocean. See these waves here? Waves. And then we've got the Gironde River, which splits into two other little rivers. So that's what that red is right there. And then we have little clusters of wine-growing regions. Not all of the land is used for wine growing, so you have these little clusters, these little dots. This squiggly region right here is kind of in between the rivers, and quite frankly, it's a region that we're not really going to talk about. What we want to talk about is right bank, left bank. Have you ever heard that term before? Right bank, left bank? People say, oh, a right bank, Bordeaux. That means, if you're standing and looking at the Atlantic, on your right-hand side, the right bank is these areas up here. Saint-Emilion, Pomerol, right? I've written a couple of the regions right there. Your general sort of Bordeaux crew there. These are areas where they grow all the major Bordeaux-style grapes, but they do a slightly different blend than you will see on the left bank. The left bank, as you're staring out to the Atlantic, is down here in this area. The actual town of Bordeaux is, boom, kind of right in between there. You get a lot of white wine being grown just a little bit further south, but up here you have areas like Medoc, where you tend to see a slightly different, a slightly different blend, a slightly different ratio of grapes. The grapes that are used in Bordeaux blends are, as I've listed down here, the kind of 5 most important: Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Malbec, and Petit Verdot. Oh my God, it looks like I've been snuggling with Garfield. I'm just covered in orange fur from that. Oh well, all right. I'm not going to wear this jacket again anytime soon. Cab Sauv, Merlot, Cab Franc, Malbec, and Petit Verdot. All of these bring a different importance to the wine when it's made. You can make a Bordeaux wine using just a couple of these. If you have, say, 3 of them, that's pretty typical. Cab Sauv, Merlot, Cab Franc. Those first 3 are the most important. Malbec and Petit Verdot kind of come in afterwards. In fact, sometimes you even see Carmenere being blended in. We've discussed in the past during our Cab Franc episode that Carmenere is part of this family. It's involved in the sort of genealogy of Cab Franc and Merlot and Cab Sauv and whatnot. But obviously they all do different things. I'm just going to go down really quickly and kind of outline what each grape brings to the Bordeaux blend. Because why would you blend these 5 grapes together? If 1 grape will do, if 2 grapes will do, why use 5? Well, basic idea, Cab Sauv tends to be a dominant grape. It is the dominant grape on left bank. When you're getting grapes from down here, you tend to see more Cab Sauv than not. And when you get those blends, it tends to be dominated by Cab Sauv and then filled out by your Merlot, your Cab Franc, and maybe your others right there. Cab Sauv is going to bring in structure. It's going to bring in tannin. These wines from the left bank tend to have fairly assertive tannin to them. They have lots of structure. They have a little bit of spice as well. There's a little bit of that peppery tone that comes in from having the Cab Sauv be dominant. Now, Merlot is another grape that vies for dominance, and it is the dominant grape on the right bank. So depending on whether you're looking at left or right, you're really getting Cab Sauv versus Merlot. Merlot is the dominant grape on the right-hand side, and Merlot brings in fruit. Tends to be juicier, tends to be fresher, tends to be riper. And so what you see from the right-hand side of Bordeaux here, from the right bank, is you see juicier wines, you see fruitier wines that also tend to be a little bit softer. Their tannins are not quite as rigid, are not quite as intense as the left bank where Cab Sauv is leading the charge. Both of these grapes then use Cab Franc as kind of a backup. In fact, it's been said that Cab Franc is grown as kind of a support grape. If you have a weak year and your Cab Sauv is not developing quite well enough, your Cab Franc has probably come in a little bit better, so you raise the proportion of Cab Franc to kind of fill in the gaps. Cab Franc is not a major grape in either of these areas in the same way that Cab Sauv and Merlot are, which is a shame. You can go back to our video about Cab Franc, talk about how much I like Cab Franc, but it is still nevertheless an important aspect of this blend, despite being a little lesser so than the other two. But it brings in fragrance, it brings in aromatics, brings in sort of a floral tone, and generally kind of lightens and enhances the entire blend, amplifies. Then we move down to some of the big guns. The Malbec and the Petit Verdot, they tend to be used sparingly. You use just little doses of them here and there, and it's because both Malbec and Petit Verdot kind of bring in similar things. They bring in weight. They bring in density. Both Malbec and Petit Verdot, high tannin. High tannin and also high coloration, high density. So when you add 3%, 5%, you are going to darken and enrich and generally make thicker and heavier that particular blend. So your Cab Franc is almost a lightening agent, and these are your kind of darkening, enriching agents right there. You put all 5 of them together, and you wind up getting your Bordeaux blend. Okay, well, we're not in Bordeaux, so I guess you didn't need to learn any of that, but I hope you enjoyed it. We are going to today talk about wines from Oliver Nasoyus, which means that they should be called Bordeaux-Style instead of Bordeaux. But there's another term that gets used for them, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes here. But first, producer Andrew, let's cut to camera 2 because I'm going to do the big reveal here. Ladies and gentlemen, I've already told you what wines these are. It says it right below in the comments, in the description, that is to say. So this completely meaningless drama, but I use these wine bags when I do wine classes in person, and I was going to flip and use them once in this entire live stream session. So here it is. So wine number 1 that we're going to discuss is the Portage Red from Lakeside Cellars. This is a brand new winery that is in their first full year of operation right now. They are currently doing tastings out of their barrel cellar, out of their tank room, so you can go right in where the action is happening. I'm back up here. Hi. And producer Andrew, can we do that bit where I keep looking at the wrong camera and then you change cameras on me? Anyways, Lakeside Cellars, they are coming in hot with some primarily Bordeaux grapes. They're very fond of their Bordeaux-style grapes. They have a beautiful plantation of Cab Sauv that was planted back in, I think it was 98 or 99. So they have some nice old Cab Sauv and some Sauv Blanc as well, which I didn't mention before, but Sauv Blanc is also a Bordeaux grape. We're just not talking about white wines today, but your Bordeaux white blend is Sauv Blanc and Semillon. And sometimes you get a little bit of Muscadet in there, but who cares about Muscadet? Am I right? Am I right?
You're right.
Yep, thank you. So Lakeside Cellars, Portage Red. That's going to be wine number 1. Wine number 2 is going to be, boom, Jackson Triggs Grand Reserve Meritage. Red Meritage, they specify, to clarify that it's not the white Meritage, which would be your Sauv Blanc Semillon. This is going to be the same grape composition as Lakeside Cellars. They are both Merlot, Cab Sauv, and Cab Franc, although in different proportions, quantities, so that's kind of fun to look at. They're both from 2016, so we're doing a nice little horizontal tasting here. 1 year, same fruit. And finally, we are going to be looking at Kismet. Kismet Estate Winery Moksha. This is a Bordeaux-style blend with a twist. This has a few little extra components in it that we will talk about when we get there, just for fun. I didn't want to cloister us in. After all, we don't live in France. I already established this. We don't live in the old world of winemaking where you have very rigid concepts about what will appear in different areas. If anybody has ever bought international wine before, you've probably realized that they don't tell you most things. You will buy a bottle of wine and it will simply say Pomerol, or it'll say Medoc. And that's what it says. And you're supposed to understand implicitly as a consumer that Medoc is in Bordeaux, that it is on the left bank, and therefore you're buying a red blend with, you know, I think they do all 5 grapes in Medoc. Correct me if I'm wrong right there. But you're supposed to understand what that wine is going to be based just on the name. That is how rigid and how prescribed the old world style of winemaking is. It's a bit of a slightly more elitist club. Not to denounce it. I'm not trying to poo-poo this, but you have to know the stuff to know the stuff, and a casual consumer doesn't really have access to that. But we are in, of course, the new world of winemaking, where for one thing, we're very explicit. Look at this Kismet bottle right here. On the back, It has exactly what grapes are inside it and exactly the proportions, the percentages of which. I don't expect you to be able to read that necessarily on the camera right there. I'm going to read it to you later. But the point is, not only are we much more transparent with the way that we make wine in the New World, but we also like to experiment. And so we're going to have a couple of examples of traditional Bordeaux-style blends, and then we're going to compare them to something that's a little bit less traditional. Okay. On with the show. By the way, of course, as is probably implied, if you have any questions, if you have anything to say through this whole thing, please type it in the comments. I've got producer Andrew. He'll let me know if there's anything that anybody wants to say. Or just say hi. Just say hi, Moss. Give it a try right now. Just type in your comment section. Just type, hi, Moss. I feel so alone out here. At least I've got producer Andrew. He's not even looking at me. He's looking at the ground as far as I can tell. Okay, let's start with wine number 1, Lakeside Cellars. Let's get this effect here. All right. Now we're really testing the camera. I was going to put a drop sheet down just in case I poured red wine all over producer Andrew's. Oh, look at that. Producer Andrew is holding up the phone. I see all the hi Mosses. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much. All right, wine number 1, Lakeside Cellars. I do realize that that part of appreciating a wine is looking at the color, and I do understand that on our camera 2 right here, we've put a constantly changing color light right behind it, which is not going to give you the best impression of what the coloration is.
The color of the wine shines through, I think.
It does? Okay, perfect, great. But yeah, it's just like the orange fuzzy suit jacket here. Last episode, overproduce it, right? So this is a 3 varietal blend from Lakeside Cellars, and you may be saying, what is Lakeside Cellars? Who are these people? Where did they come from? Well, as I mentioned prior, Lakeside Cellars is quite a new winery. They basically just launched. This wine is from 2016, and that was their foundation year. That was their first vintage. They are a family-run winery. It's the Dollywall family who have been working in agriculture, in farming in the Okanagan since the 80s, and then in the 2000s started growing grapes. And eventually, as the story tends to go, I'm sure everybody has now heard me say this a dozen times on these live streams, but as the story goes, you start growing grapes, you sell them to other operations, you start to really see the quality of your own fruit as a farmer, and eventually you think to yourself, I would love to turn this into my own wine instead of just selling off all the crop. And so that's exactly what the Dollywalls did when they started up Lakeside Cellars. If you are familiar with local Osoyoos geography, which I'm sure 3 or 4 of you are, down by the lake, Lakeshore Drive, which heads out towards Walnut Beach Resort on the east side of the bridge. When you're heading along Lakeshore Drive, there is this beautiful waterfront property, and that is going to be the foundation of the Lakeside Cellars tasting room. It is still in construction right now, and so they are inviting people to come and visit. They are open every day of the week. They plan to be open all through the winter, which is fantastic for any of the locals who live in town. You can still actually go in and get your wine. Not everybody's going to be open this winter with COVID happening, and the potential of restrictions tightening. Nobody's really sure exactly what is going to be happening. Some wineries have already planned to shut down for the winter, I know. But these Lakeside, these ones will be still open. They'll still be available for you to come in by reservation, I think, only during the winter. But right now, you can just pop on in. You can try some of their wine. They're making absolutely fantastic stuff. And like I said, right now you're accessing it through their cellar, which is actually just on the main drag. If you're heading, it's basically right at the junction where you would turn left to go to Incomeep Cellars. Right before that, on the right-hand side, there's the Lakeside tasting facility. But About the wine specifically, like I said, they focus on Bordeaux-style grapes, Bordeaux grapes, Merlot, Cab Sauv, Cab Franc. And this particular wine right here, this is something a little bit fun. I said that we were going to start with something traditional, and so we are. It's the top three: Cab Sauv, Merlot, Cab Franc. But there is something a little untraditional about this wine, and it is the proportion. I told you that right bank favors Merlot, left bank favors Cab Sauv. Well, guess what this favors? It's my favorite. Favors Cab Franc. You've got about 46% Cab Franc. I think it was 46. 44% Cab Franc. I am very sorry for that flub. And Cab Sauv is coming in at about 32%, and the remainder, your 24% or so, is Merlot. So we have a Cab Franc dominated Bordeaux style blend, which is really cool because, like I said, Cab Franc brings in aromatics. It brings in these interesting floral tones to the wine. The other two are bringing in your sort of denser, darker fruit and your tannin, your structure, but the Cab Franc is giving it a little bit of elegance. Plus, beside that, this wine has been processed in entirely neutral French oak. So just to remind everybody, when you have oak barrels, French oak tends to be softer, American oak tends to be punchier, and a brand new oak barrel is going to taste very much like oak, but then as it ages, the flavor softens until it's rendered neutral after about half a decade or so. And at that point, you can still use the barrels to soften the texture, to add in wood tannin, to oxidize the wine a little bit. It does a lot for texture, but it's not doing a ton for flavor. It's not adding a lot of that woodsy flavor. And so that means that 24 months this wine spent in neutral oak barrels, which means that they were not trying to make it taste like wood. They were trying to really enhance and amplify the natural flavors of the wine itself. And they were simply allowing the oak to build structure. And 24 months inside an oak barrel is actually going to burn off a lot of the harsher tannin that you would get initially. So this wine has been sort of deliberately softened through that time and kind of enriched in terms of its texture. So I gave it a little swirl there. I opened these wines this afternoon so that they had a few hours to be open. Basically any of these bigger red wines, you're going to want to give them a little bit of time to breathe. You don't want to crack them open right as you're about to taste them. You want to give them a little bit of air, a little bit of oxygen. And so for each one of them, I cracked them open, I left them open for a little bit, and I also did the Canberra decanter, which I learned from Karen, my Australian coworker at a previous winery, where you just jam your thumb in the bottle and then you just chug, 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 shake it up to get a little bit of bubble in there. And that kind of helps oxidize it rapidly. You have to make sure your thumb's really in there. It smells fantastic. Okay, I'll be careful. Aha! Yeah. Oh boy. I really should have got that drop sheet. Producer Andrew is housing me today. I'm in his apartment, and he's got white carpets. So,
Trust in you.
boy, oh boy, is that exciting. Adds a whole new level to this. Season finale. The stakes are high. This is sort of a delightfully floral wine. As I mentioned, the Cab Franc is the largest proportion, and possibly because I'm aware of that, because I'm thinking about that, I'm looking out for those tones of like violet. I'm getting these slightly peppery, but also slightly floral tones. It's a fresh floral. I get a little bit of red cherry. I like that red fruit. 2016 was quite a nice year. 2012 was pretty hot. 13 was even hotter. 14 was a little more balanced. 15 was scathing hot. 16 was kind of balanced again. It wasn't a cold year. We haven't really had any cold years since 2011, but 17 and 18, were cooler. They had some inhibition in terms of the ripening in certain places. But 16 was just a really nice year. So it's actually a really good year to look at wines like this, because you're not getting a huge amount of that vintage character shining through. You look at a 2015 wine, and it's hard to ignore the fact that it's from 2015. You look at a 2011, hard to ignore it's from 2011, because all you're tasting is the heat or the cold and the impact on the wine. 2016 is kind of blank slates, just allowing the wine to talk. So I'm getting red cherry. I'm still getting tons and tons of that violet. A little bit of white flower now too, which is really lovely on a red wine. Very elegant. I'm going to take a taste. That's lovely. It has pretty well structured tannin, but you can really tell that they were using aged barrels, not quite seasoning it with as much wood tannin as a newer barrel would, and that they've left it in there for 24 months, which just allows the oxygen to break the tannin down. Because the tannin is there, but it isn't gripping, it isn't grabbing at my cheeks, right? That's the effect that tannin has on you. It has that raspy feel. You know, it's kind of like sandpaper on your cheeks. This is a far cry from that. Kind of velvety instead. Really lovely. Bit of acid, right? Coming in from the Cab Franc, I imagine. It tends to be the higher acid of these three grapes. And that little tiny touch of acidity is just giving it a little bit of brightness, a little bit of freshness, and is really kind of doubling down on that red cherry tone that I mentioned before. Really nice wine, and a nice representation of three grapes that people are fairly familiar with, but in a slightly different fashion, right? This is just a slightly different perspective on them. Very nice. The owner of Lakeside Cellars is extremely fond of Cab Franc and loves working with it in the vineyard, and so wanted to utilize it to its fullest extent. They're working with winemaking consultant Jason Park, who some people might know as the consultant who also works for Indigenous World Winery up in West Bank, the Hatch, and what's the constellation? Perseus, down by Naramata there. Wonderful. All right. Well, there you go. Lakeside Cellars, Portage Red, a really lovely wine, and an absolute steal as well. $24 after tax, which is pretty much nothing, especially for a red blend like this. They've got some wonderful wines, and so you should really check them out because they are going to be open, as I said, all winter, I believe by appointment once we sort of pass into the colder months there. But as I said, well worth a look if you haven't tried their work before. How are we doing, producer Andrew?
Doing great, Mom.
Wonderful, thank you very much. I mean, I meant you, but then we kind of turned it into like me asking how I was doing. So, what we've got next is Jackson Triggs Grand Reserve Red Meritage 2016. A lot of words there. Jackson Triggs, for anybody who has never tried Canadian wine before, I guess, Jackson Triggs is one of the foundational wines in terms of the entire Canadian wine scene. It has establishments in Ontario, in Niagara, and also out here in the Okanagan, right? So the two most prime spots for grape growing and wine production, two most historic spots for grape production in the whole country, and they've been around since 99. Let me check my. Sorry, no, 93. 93, not 99. Early 90s. In 1993, that's when Don Triggs and Alan Jackson together kind of created the Jackson Triggs line. And Jackson Triggs has been right in the center of Canada's largest and most successful wine company, wine organization, since its foundation. For kind of the quick history right here, there was a conglomerate of a couple different wineries. There was Inniskillen, Bright's Wines, T.G. Bright, and Jackson Triggs, kind of all together in a little organization called Vincor, way back in the early 90s. And then in, I think it was the mid 2010s? Maybe around 2010. Again, don't hold me to that date. I'm kind of guessing a little bit here. It was purchased by Constellation Brands out of the United States. And so it got kind of lumped in together with this enormous machine that also had many American wineries, had Carlos Santana's personal tequila line, Corona. There's a lot of things being sold by Constellation Brands. And so they were Constellation Brands for a time. And by this time, we've also expanded and we've also included within this Sumac Ridge up in Summerland there, See You Later Ranch in Okanagan Falls, and Incomeep Cellars, which is 49% owned by, at this time, Constellation, and 51% owned by the First Nations band in Osoyoos. So you've got these 5 wineries. And then you've also got some other brands kind of coming into it as well. But then a few years ago, I think 3 years ago, Constellation Brands sold to the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, and the entire organization, now Canadian again, fully Canadian, renamed themselves Arterra. So now if you ever see that term Arterra, it is in reference to a bunch of these different brands like Jackson Triggs, Inniskillen, Sumac Ridge, See You Later Ranch, and Incomeep Cellars, and is, like I said before, all entirely Canadian owned, which is pretty fantastic to say. Jackson Triggs has been at the core, at the forefront of this through the entirety of it. They have had some incredible acclaim. In 2006, Jackson Triggs became the first Canadian wine to ever be recognized by the International Wine and Spirits Competition, where it won Best Shiraz in the world, Best Syrah in the world. And so from kind of that point on, they have repeatedly been named by this incredibly prestigious, this incredibly weighty international competition as the top Canadian winery year after year after year. They make absolutely stellar wines in several different tiers. You'll see this is called Grand Reserve. They have Reserve, then they have Grand Reserve. They make pretty fantastic wines that maybe some people would not recognize, because they also make kind of their white label, which is their more mass-produced, still pretty tasty, but a little more functional and commonplace wines. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, that's the wine that they've seen. That's the wine that they see in the liquor stores. They see Jackson Triggs and they think of it as, it's a relatively inexpensive bottle. But if you're writing off Jackson Triggs because you have seen some of this slightly lower tier wine, some of this more commonplace wine, then you obviously have not tasted their genuine estate-grown Okanagan product. Out here at the Okanagan Estate, they make some truly fantastic wines. And the Grand Reserve is the slightly more rare, slightly more exclusive tier where less fruit is harvested, smaller batches of fruit are taken in to kind of ensure higher quality. And generally speaking, everything is just given a little bit more care. And you wind up getting something that is really quite fantastic. So without further preamble, let's get into the 2016 Jackson Triggs Red Meritage. Now this is going to be more of our traditional Bordeaux-style wine. Oh no, did I do it? Did I do the pour? Did we get camera 2? Oh, okay, phew. Because I totally forgot what I was doing. I was talking. So,
I'm on it.
okay, all right. I'm so glad I've got somebody else to care for me here. So this is, like I was just saying there, a more traditional Bordeaux-style wine, and specifically, this is the sort of thing that you would see a little bit more on your left bank, because this is Cab Sauv dominant. You've got your Merlot, you've got your Cab Franc in there, but it's being led by Cab Sauv. So this is kind of your left bank style. But there are some vital distinctions between saying that, oh, this is just like old world wine, and actually having it taste like old world wine. A lot of people probably argue this tastes better. Again, not trying to denounce or blemish the name of old world wine making styles, but not everybody likes it. There tends to be something very austere, something very rigid, and sometimes overly dry or lacking in the juicy fruit that a lot of Western audiences tend to really enjoy. A lot of North American audiences, I should say. And so what this is a wine that takes the combination of grapes that you would typically see in this old world region and infuses it with a little bit of new world energy. And so it tends to be a little bit juicier, it tends to be a little bit fruitier, it tends to be a little bigger, a little bit brighter, while not being quite as aggressive with the tannin. So, being Cab Sauv dominant, right away it's a little darker, and we can smell that. Something that's really satisfying to do if you ever want to kind of experiment and play around is you give people wine in opaque glasses, and you can do that by just taping a little bit of card paper around the outside of a wine glass, and you let people smell and taste wine without actually being able to see the wine inside, and it's wonderful to see. For one thing, the mistakes people make. People will call red wine, white wine, red wine. They'll make these huge mistakes that you think, wow, how could you do that? But at the same time, you'll also be really impressed by some of the intuition. You smell a wine like this, and it smells thicker, it smells stickier, it smells richer. And right away, if you kind of know what you're talking about, you could guess that, oh, okay, we're probably not being led by something a little bit lighter like Cab Franc. Instead, this seems like Cab Sauv. It has this dark cherry, this kind of rich, kind of sticky toffee almost tone right there. This is 2016, and I should point out quickly that Jackson Triggs is now actually sold out of their 2016 Grand Reserve red Meritage. So what I'd be encouraging people to pick up is the 2017, which is on sale right now, and the 2017 is also tasting fantastic. I happened to have the 2016 in my cellar, kind of available to me right here. So alas, I'm lagging behind a little bit, but. But I still recommend going out for the 2017. So again, you smell that kind of richness, you smell that density there. And on the palate, it's full, it's pronounced. You can definitely feel the tannin. The tannin is totally there. Like I said before, you get that slightly dry kind of little bit of roughness on the cheeks, but even this is not overwhelming, not even in the least. It's quite a pleasant textural tannin. It's chewy without kind of biting back. You get a little bit of the sort of gravelly, earthy character that Cab Sauv can be known for. You can tell that it was well grown, that it was a good vintage. Didn't suffer from some of the temperature issues that some of these other years have had, because there's absolutely none of the kind of green pepper that you can sometimes get from underripe Cab Sauv. not even close to present right here. You have a rich, full-bodied wine with great texture, lovely tannin, and dark, rich fruit tones, and a nice little bit of earthiness right there. There's pleasant complexity. They used a more aggressive oak profile than the Lakeside, right? The Lakeside was entirely French oak, 24 months neutral. This was, typically they do this for about 14 months, but they do it in newer oak, right? Proportionately, a little bit of it is new oak, and then they kind of taper out from there. And they're also using a combination of French and American oak barrels too. And so the American oak is also adding a little bit of punch. It's kind of enhancing that toastiness. I said kind of sticky toffee there on the nose. There's a little hint of that toastiness coming in from the toasted oak. Wonderful. So this wine comes in at $29 retail after tax. I think it's maybe $28.35, something like that. A little over $28 after tax. Again, a wonderful deal, a fantastic wine. And Jackson Triggs is another winery that is going to be staying open. They were closed for a grand total of 4 days all of last year, and even though 2020 is what it is, they're not really looking to change that. They are going to be open all winter round. You can order their wine online, but this right here, the Grand Reserve, is something that that tends to be a little bit more restricted. They don't make as much of it, and so best way to find it out there in the world is just to order it directly from them or to come visit them in person as well. You can try all their different wines. Jackson Triggs and Inniskillen share the same tasting room, which means that you can go to the Jackson Triggs facility, which is just north of Oliver towards Lake Gallagher Lake. Sorry, I've been away from the Okanagan for 2 months and I forget how to say all the names. Gallagher Lake, just shy of there, is Jackson Triggs, and you can go in there and you can try the Inniskillen wines and the Jackson Triggs, and as well some of the other brands like Sunrock, which we've talked about on this before, Dark Horse. They've got some wonderful brands all kind of together under one roof, and they put on a great tasting. Everybody there is really lovely. So please stop by Jackson Triggs, try some of their wine, and reassure yourself that it isn't all just the white label stuff. Okay, on to wine number 3. This is the Kismet. I'm going to really play with the cameras here. This is the Kismet Moksha from 2016.
Keep me
Don't want producer Andrew getting bored. This is not a conventional Bordeaux-style wine. It does have Malbec, but it's also got some other things. In fact, Malbec is the only grape that it shares with the rest of these Bordeaux wines right here. So in fact, putting 3 wines together and saying, let's talk about Bordeaux-style wines, and having one of them be the Kismet Moksha is actually very disingenuous of me. So sorry about that. But, we're talking about red blends. And this is a really valuable way to examine the character of these red blends. I don't need to defend myself to you. It has Malbec in it, about 24%. But then it also has, here's the fun stuff, it has 12% Grenache, or as the Spanish call it, Garnacha, which is a much better term. It has about 12% Mourvedre, which is a grape that nobody knows about, but it is real. And it has 42% Syrah. So there's the bulk of it, right? We have wines that are led by Cab Franc, Cab Sauv, and in this case, Syrah. Syrah, not on this map. Down, south, east, into the Rhone Valley. That's where you see Syrah. That's where you see Garnacha. I couldn't decide whether I was going to do the French or the Spanish term. And that's where you see Mourvedre. Your GSM is your Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre. You almost never see Grenache or Mourvedre being grown in British Columbia. So it's really, really fun to see them utilized in a wine like this. Kismet grows some, but this is pretty much the only red wine where you see something like Mourvedre. They use a little bit in a rosé that they produced with some orange muscat as well, which is a delicious rosé. But if you want your Mourvedre kick, you got to get the Moksha. The Moksha is where it's happening. So this is a wine that has Syrah, it has Malbec, it has Mourvedre, it has Grenache, and it also has a little bit of Viognier, 10% Viognier. I think we talked about this in the past. I think I don't even remember now. I did a Viognier episode, right? Where I talked about how Viognier is a really cool blending wine. It's a white wine, but you mix it together with a red and it just gives that red a little extra vigor. Doesn't water it down, doesn't make it taste like white wine. It just makes it taste more like what it is. So this is kind of a modified GSM. This is like a Rhone blend with a little bit of Bordeaux sneaking into it. And this is why I wanted to talk about the difference between old world and new world winemaking, right? This is the creativity that you get from new world style seeping into old world concepts. You take these blends that are somewhat traditional over there and you change them and you modify them and you just blend until it tastes right, basically. Now, Kismet. Really quick note about Kismet here. Absolutely stunning new winery. They've been around for several years now, but easy to still think of them as kind of a relatively fresh face on the market. But they are probably one of the most exciting new wineries that has started up within the last half a decade, because they have the same basic backstory as Lakeside. You've got a couple of brothers who are farming, who get into growing grapes, and then eventually decide, we want to make this wine ourselves. They're even called Dhaliwal. Their last name is Dhaliwal, just different Dhaliwals in this case. So a lot of similarities. But Kismet just got there a little earlier is the difference. So Kismet comes out with these fantastic wines coming in really hot. The name of the winery has this sort of wonderful cultural connotation to it. Kismet, of course, means a destiny, and all of their wines are kind of rich with these concepts like Kismet and karma and even moksha right here. The term means the liberation of the spirit, sort of the freedom of the spirit. And so you have absolutely fantastic wines that have kind of a fun theme and style to them, and paired together with probably one of the best, if not the best, debatably the best winery restaurant in the Okanagan, the Masala Bistro, where they do just absolutely killer world-class East Indian cuisine that they pair together with their wines. This wine right here, the Moksha, specifically in the restaurant, they put it together with lamb korma, and I mean, what a fantastic pairing. So, smells so good. I hope that some people bought this wine. I hope that everybody bought this wine and that you are also tasting it and smelling it right now as I'm smelling it, because it seems cruel that I should be smelling this wine while you cannot be. Producer Andrew, can we get them to smell the wine? Is that something we can do? Do you have that technology?
I mean, I think you just enabled that technology.
Okay. So this is obviously a very different wine because it's being led by totally different grapes. But there are some similarities, right? There's kind of the world of red blends, and we walk within different kind of areas there. But Syrah is leading out with this dark, juicy fruit. You're getting fruit immediately there on the nose. You're getting a lot of spice. You're getting pepper, and you're getting this kind of complex floral kind of backing track that's coming in there. that lends the wine such intrigue, right? You smell the wine, you're getting these primary fruit characteristics, but then you're getting this tickle of all these different things in behind. You're getting a little bit of caramelization, you're getting a little bit of this sweetness. You're getting these sort of dark blueberry, this kind of rich blueberry juice fragrance. You know how blueberries actually have like kind of an aromatic floral fragrance to them? If you squeeze blueberry juice, it's very labor intensive, but if you have blueberry juice, there's a smell to it that is kind of a little bit floral. So the smell's a bit like blueberry juice. Get a bit of blackberry, a little bit of cassis. Get that that pepper coming in. A little bit of earthiness. I mean, just a wonderful smelling wine. This is, for a lot of people, this is their favorite wine. This is a wine that a lot of people would just say, this is my favorite. So I guess I didn't need to reiterate that. I just said the same thing twice.
I get it, though. I get it.
I had to say it the second time. Tastes like blueberry juice. You know, that first sip there, it has this fruit juice flavor, which sounds demeaning. It sounds derogative. You know, it sounds childish. Fruit juice, right? But no, it's so refreshing. It's so bright. And despite the fact that it smells kind of burly and rich and full, on the palate you get something that is clean. It isn't overladen or overburdened. It is not a huge, heavy wine. It has some freshness. It has some vitality to it, and it doesn't taste tart either. Sometimes when you have a lighter red, it's light because there's acid coming in and kind of freshening up the tannin there. With this, it feels effortlessly light and very cleanly balanced, without any of these hard edges showing through. It's a magnificent wine. All of these nuances that you get on the nose kind of transfer through onto the palate. You wind up getting that little bit of toastiness, that little hint of caramelized sweetness. This is also a wine that's produced in both French and American oak barrels, which means that you get a little bit of that toastiness from the American oak. It obviously has a lot of this fruit, but there is that little kind of hint of floral. You kind of get that on the finish. On the palate, you get all fruit, and then these other flavors kind of come in after the wine has gone out of your mouth, as it's kind of evaporating off your tongue. A little bit of pepper, but not peppery in the same way that some Syrah can be. I mean, it's just a beautiful wine. It's a really elegant wine, and if you have not tried this or any of the wines from Kismet, then you've done yourself a sore disservice. You should be ashamed, and you should go and you should try them, and you should go to their restaurant because it's really good. You should have this wine with some lamb korma, and you'll be just a happy person. This wine, after tax, comes in around $38.5. Rightly so. It's an absolutely magnificent wine, expertly crafted, and it is only available as long as it's available. They make about, I think they make about 300 cases of this. It is only available for sale at the winery itself, so you can only get it by visiting there or ordering online. And Kismet tends to sell out every year, so they are open for as long as they have wine. So like Lakeside and like Jackson Triggs, they are intending to be open for the winter, but you know, any locals from the Okanagan will know that eventually you get to November or something like that, you're driving past Kismet, and there's just a big sign out that says, "Sold out, we'll see you next year." So theoretically on paper, you can come anytime you want and visit, but in reality, you should probably visit sooner than later to make sure that you actually get this stuff. They also have done a sparkling muscat, which they call mimosa in a bottle because it has this sort of bubbly and orange juice character to it. Wonderful wine, absolutely incredible wine. You should definitely check that out. All right, everybody. Well, I'm going to drink some more of this wine. That's good. All right, everybody. I just wanted to wrap with one kind of final closing statement about Bordeaux wines. Having the Kismet in there, like I said, at first glance it seems a little strange. Why didn't I have 3 wines that were all authentically Bordeaux-style blends with these 5 grapes that Bordeaux uses? And certainly there's no shortage of selection. If you want wines that show off blends of these grapes, just about every winery in Oliver and Osoyoos has something to offer like that, and most of them are absolutely magnificent. In fact, a lot of them typically get raised up to the icon status. Icon being a term that tends to be used for one of these wines, one of these Bordeaux-style blends that is kind of the cream of the crop, the best of the best. If it's a winery that's typically selling wines around $25, $30, that'll be the wine that costs $50 because that's the one that kind of shows off, everything that they could possibly put into it. And so, there's a very good reason why we decided to close out this season by talking about this style of wine, because it is so important to wine culture and winemaking. But I wanted to have the Kismet in there to show that, you can creep some different grapes in there and have some interesting effects. Producer Andrew, camera 2. Here's a list of words. Most of these words are probably unfamiliar to you, but this is a list of other grapes that have now been introduced to the Bordeaux repertoire, basically for fear of climate change and sort of weakening, how to say it here. Because the world is getting hotter and everything's melting, a lot of these grapes that are typically grown in Bordeaux, our 5 classics here, they may not be doing so well on a long-term basis. You're going to start to see years where it's so hot that you're going to get poor crops of these grapes. And so what has happened in Bordeaux is they have permitted, It's 7 new grapes to be allowed into the repertoire so that they can kind of bring some fresh blood in there and hopefully have some grapes that can withstand some of the escalating temperatures that they're going to see. So even Bordeaux has acknowledged that it doesn't need to just be these 5 grapes. Like I said, you don't know what any of these things mean. The only grapes that I recognize from this list are Albarino, because like Garnacha, it's a very fun grape name. I've not tried Albarino. No, I have tried it, but anyways, I've not tried it often, but it is fun. Albarino. And what's this last one here? Triggs Nacional. Ooh, these are kind of, hotter Mediterranean. These are Spanish grapes here. Triggs Nacional may ring a bell to some fans of Oliver Osoyoos wine, because this is a grape that is grown by Moon Cursor, which means that when it comes to putting together new style Bordeaux blends, Moon Cursor now suddenly has an advantage. They can use one of the hot new grapes that nobody else has their hands on. So get to it, guys. Make that blend, I guess. So I guess the message is that everybody's important and life is special. Thank you very much for watching the season finale of the virtual Vinstitute. We are going to take a little break here. We're going to take a hiatus and kind of figure out what format we want this to come back in. So if anybody has been a fan of these live streams, if anybody has enjoyed watching them, then please let us know. It's great to hear your feedback, even if it is just a little bit of shameless praise. But especially if there are things that you'd like to see. If you want to see a different format for this series, if you want to see a different style, if you want to see different things explored or talked about for both this and the podcast, like I said, we're retiring both of them within this this kind of 1 week period, and so we want to know what you guys, the listeners and the watchers, all think about both the podcast and the live stream. Give us your comments. You can post, but quite frankly, social media always tends to get kind of lost in the in the mix there. The best way to give us any kind of salient feedback is to send me an email at moss@vinstitute.ca. Just shoot an email over to moss@vinstitute.ca and let us know what you think of the show and if there's anything else that you'd like to see in the future. But until then, thank you everybody for watching. It's been an absolute joy putting on this series. Thank you again to producer Andrew for allowing this finale to have all the gusto and pizzazz that it probably always deserved to have, but I never really felt like permitting it to. And also thank you, producer Andrew, for giving us this cool colored light to shine on the back of our bottles.
I'm going crazy with the other one.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Cheers. I'm gonna get in here. Oh, camera 2. Whoa.
Here we go.
Didn't expect that. Hey. All right. Cheers. Back to camera 1. I'm done. You can end the stream now. Good night. Are we good?